Hello. After reviewing the chapters, I decided to do a chapter review on chapter 3 after all. I think I was going to skip that one, that and 6, and I might do them both anyway. Um, there isn't a lot. There's kind of a crossover in the material in this chapter, but I think it was worthy of touching base in a couple of those categories in particular. And it starts out, I'm looking at our textbook, chapter 3. At pleasure travel. Obviously, we know what that is, right? 81% of domestic travel is pleasure travel. Part of the reason it's changed, if you look at some of the things they have highlighted here, we're just living longer, right? And people are healthier longer, right? So they're retiring earlier and they're still healthy. And then what do you want to do? Oh, let's go travel, right? Because we're all working all the time and never got to travel. Flexible working hours, greater ease of travel because we have different modes of transportation and technology. The tendency for shorter and more frequent trips. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the phrase. It was coined during the crash after 2008, staycations. And that had a huge effect on our economy and our travel. So domestic travel became pretty much involving your car. They had more car travel during that period for staycations than flying. And of course, this was after 9/11 also, right? And then the crash after 2008. Kind of these two big things right there started this craze for staycations. Like, wow, look at all the things we could do in Wisconsin. How many of us even do anything in Wisconsin, right? We're like, wow, there's nothing to do here. We live here, right? And then all of a sudden, like in little Galesville where I live, right? We have apple affair and thousands of people come here because we got apples everywhere. I got an apple on my desk right now from the local orchard that I can be there in like 3 minutes. Right? Um, so our parks filled up, our local parks, our state parks filled up. I found that out because I take my motorcycle and I go camping in the summertime. I generally head for Ontario, but I'll do some local, park camps and stuff. I usually do state parks and things. When I'm in Canada, I do their provincial parks, which are like our federal parks. And because I'm looking for remote areas, and I'll go to places where nobody goes because, like, this is a small state park, nobody goes there. Oh my gosh, they were packed because people started traveling within our local facility. I think it was like within a 100-mile radius. People had sort of narrowed down their travel to, and of course, they didn't have a lot of money because that's when part of the housing crash. And then, of course, as our increase in standard of living, we can take vacations. And then it gets into why people take a vacation, and that was part of the reading in chapters 1 and 2 as well. Different people, different strokes for different folks, right? So they talk about scenic beauty, pleasant attributes of the local people, subtle accommodations. You guys can read the list of that. So there's a lot of different reasons why people travel. I have some friends that are they're sports fanatics, right? So they go to what's the golf or not golf? That's the Open. But the tennis. They go to the tennis thing. Look at that's how much sporty I am, right? They go to the golf, the Open. They go to the like the horse races in Kentucky, things like that. Big events, right? Super Bowl, stuff like that. But they don't just go to like the regular stuff that you and I might think about, the Super Bowl or bowl games. They go to all these other different sports things too. So they travel for that reason. And of course, I'm a triathlete. Well, now I do aquabike, which I swim and bike. I can't run anymore. I used to do all 3 legs of the race, but now I do that. I can compete with the 2. So a ton of us travel just for races. There are one friends that are ultra racers. I mean, they travel all over the United States for races. Now that it launches us into the whole idea of business travel. Business travel is way down. There's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, just think about the technology. I'm doing a webcam video for you in our online class, so we're not traveling to our campuses, are we? Right? Well, we're doing the same thing at work, what we have been a long time. We've been using, before video conferencing, we were doing phone conferences and things like that. And companies have products too that help coordinate the effort so they can try to save more money. So budgets has a huge, huge deal to do with this. So the company my husband just retired from, a multinational, multi-international company, they have corporate event planners, right? So they not only plan the events, but they plan all of their travel. And if you look at, I thought it was interesting here because I was unfamiliar with this on page 56 of this edition, third edition. Talking about Roam. It's called Roam. Some companies use a product from Microsoft and American Express called Roam. And this coordinates everybody to making sure they're using their American Express, making sure they're using, a certain airline for the company, because then the company's getting a discount, right? And they lose money if the individual circumvents the system and like books their own stuff online. And then they go on to talk about social and cultural impacts of tourism. This is what why I decided to go back to this chapter or these sections here. Some countries, this is literally their only income. Belize used to be one of those. Well, pretty much still is. They really don't. They had at the time in the late 80s into the 90s. I haven't looked recently. About their only export was bananas. So the only export was their services for ecotourism. They were very early because that's a third world country. It's in Central America, and they didn't have a lot of, there wasn't a lot of tourism, but they were starting to figure out that there was a lot of money in it, where they didn't have any other way to, that would affect or greatly affect their gross domestic product, right? Their GPA, all education in my head. Anyway, so is it good or is it bad, right? Well, it can be both, right? It had huge positive effects, economically, but it can have a lot of negative impacts on the local communities. From leaving garbage everywhere to actually, people trashing and ruining, ruins or artifacts that are thousands of years old. One of the things they mentioned here on page 57 was provided that the number of tourists is manageable and that they respect the host community's, sociocultural norms and values, tourism provides an opportunity for a number of social interactions. And they go that, and is basically what each section is talking about, and that's kind of what has pushed us towards more ecotourism. So if you look on the next page, and they're talking about what is ecotourism, and they offer us various definitions here. The one I really like here comes from Dr. Weaver, and that's a form of tourism that fosters learning experiences and appreciation of the natural environment or some component thereof, wherein its associated cultural context, it is managed in accordance with industry's best practices to attain environmentally and sociocultural sustainable outcomes, as well as financial viability. Oh my gosh, that's such a mouthful. It's called doing the right thing for everybody involved and supporting them financially as we do that. We used to scuba dive a lot too, and I cannot tell you what people do to coral reefs. I mean, it's just would flabbergast us. Like, no, you don't touch the coral reef. It's living. It's a living, and when you touch it, you kill it, right? No, you don't stand on it. You don't do things to it. You don't touch animals. You don't touch the wildlife. And we would see people doing really stupid things and at depth underwater, no less, right? But that's the whole idea behind this. We can still enjoy scuba diving, but we need to do it ethically. So, you're going to do some work here in ethics in our week 3 when it comes to like people within the industry. But this is what this is kind of talking about. When I think of ecotourism, ethical travel, they actually talk about ethical travel in this book as well. That's what we're referring to. And that's why I decided to go back to this, because I've seen some really terrible things done because I've traveled a lot to the local environments just by tourists, right? And as they go on, and then the book here, talks about sandals. I have a love-hate relationship with places like that because I've been to Jamaica. We didn't stay at Sandals, and it was a gift, an all-inclusive, which I don't usually do that sort of thing. And I just literally felt like I was a captive. They don't really want you to leave the compounds. They don't want you interacting with the local people. So how are you really spending your money? Well, it's going through the fact that the corporation that built not necessarily just Sandals, because there's a lot of, we were at I think it was a property that was owned through, I don't remember the parent company at the time, but through Holiday Inn at the time. That would have been, oh God, 20 years ago. Anyway, not allowed to tip the servers or anybody in the hotel because they have it all very controlled. I didn't play nice, though. I went over the wall. I hired a driver and I left. I said, I am not doing this. And my husband finally said, you can't go alone. I better go with you. And we spent the day with a driver and just said, no, take us to, where you live and where there's regular Jamaican food. And we ended up in the coolest places and just back alleys and open regular markets where no tourists were. And sometimes you just aren't able, or people are afraid to do that. So they kind of get sucked into that sort of tourist mode, because it can seem a little scary. Then it talks again about cultural tourism. How does that action of bringing all of these people in to, and we're often going to places that aren't visited very, regularly, they're remote or, unusual. How is our impact on their culture? And they talk about the pros and cons of this. On page 63, they use the example of Bali. They talked about how, starting in the 70s, the good things that it did, but by the time you get through that next section here, you get to the point where they say many people have begun to curse the tourists for dressing inappropriately and a bunch of other reasons, right? Because sometimes people don't take into consideration their host country and what their traditions are, right? If it's a modest tradition, then you should dress modestly. And of course, some people say, well, I'm an American, I can do whatever I want, or I'm a, British or whatever it is. But we kind of forget that. And then how it affects the actual artwork, the art world. Travel a lot in Mexico too. And some of the local, the local artists, they do such beautiful things. And then they get supplanted by people that kind of start bringing in imitation, made in Hong Kong kind of thing. And then it starts to actually compete against those that are actually hand making things. Heritage tourism, we could also say, the study of history, our heritage, that thing. That's kind of big in the States, and I was surprised. I was kind of interested that they actually mentioned it in this book too. I didn't know they were going to bring up the Alamo. I had no idea that was a big site. But they do, again, mention the main problem with conserving heritage is that the sheer volume of tourism, may, if not properly managed, come into conflict and defeat the whole, purpose of the conservation of the heritage in the first place, right? So we definitely need policies and procedures, that's kind of what the chapter leaps into then. What are the benefits of preservation? But what are those challenges in doing that? In Galesville, I can't remember what year it was, they started a downtown preservation thing. We have a beautiful little downtown gazebo on the square, and I said it attracts a lot of people throughout the summer. And they kind of got into a battle because everybody was in agreement that they would restore all of the old buildings and the storefronts, except for one owner. Okay, now we're in a war, right? Can we make them, right, spend a bunch of money in their storefront, right? So that it is part of the historical downtown, when really tourists aren't stopping because they're the type of business they had at the time. They weren't being served by tourists, right? It's like, well, why should we spend money on it? So you have to kind of find this, and page 67 talks about that fit between community and tourism, right? And they give you the steps, and you can read that, the 4 steps to a comprehensive heritage program. You can read that part. And then, of course, it winds down towards, nature or natural tourism. And a lot of us that go camping, that's what we're there for. I mean, I go into the most northern, farthest reaches of Ontario that I can get to, where the roads end, right? And I can't get any farther on my motorcycle. I ended up in a place like that in Manitoba this last summer. And it's incredible to turn around and see a gray wolf, 30 paces from you. You just about fall over. An eagle on a kill, just off the side of the road, things like that. So there's people like us that really travel because we want to see nature, but then again, there's always those people out there that, again, there's the balance, right, that do stupid things, right? Not too long ago on the news, and people were out in their kayaks by the orcas. Well, they were a little too close, and the orca got mad. He's way bigger than you when you're a little kayak, and they gave him a good old whack or whatever it was, right? I don't think anybody got killed or anything. So look at the trends in travel. Look at the career information, because again, this is a whole, in week 3, you guys are going to be looking at this whole idea of, how do you follow your passion and apply it to something in this industry? So for me, looking at things like that, loving travel, loving the outdoors, I could definitely see where I'll maybe be involved in heritage preservation or whatever that is, might be a good fit. So that wraps up chapter 3. I'll see about chapter 6. I think I've got 4 and 5 done somewhere. I'm just having a slow internet connection today to get these uploaded. So anyway, until next time, you guys have a good day.